Do you have trouble finding your family in the census? Well, you're not alone. It's something that any genealogist has had happen to them at one point or another. Maybe you found somebody in one decade, but you can't find them in the other decade, and you're frustrated they've got to be somewhere and you just can't find them. Well, there's a lot of great techniques to finding your family in the census, but at Roots Tech, I had the opportunity to be sitting with Mike Mansfield. He's the Director of Content Operations at MyHeritage, and he is a wealth of information. He's worked for both Ancestry and Family Search as well, and he's been doing this content for a long time, and he filled me in on some things about the census records and how they handle the census records that can really make a difference and help you do a better job of finding your family in the census. But I have to warn you, my son was looking at it with me and he was like, "Mom, you look so tired." This was day 3 of Roots Tech, and it's true. I was really tired. But Mike is a wealth of information and you're gonna love it. So check it out. I'm joined here by Mike Mansfield from MyHeritage, and he has some great solutions for us. So I talked him into coming over and helping me out and sharing some of his great thoughts with you. So tell us a little bit about you, Mike.
Awesome, thank you, Aimee. Yeah, so my name is Mike Mansfield. I've worked in the industry since 1999. In 1999, I was at Ancestry, where we started digitizing and indexing U.S. federal census records. Really one of the biggest projects there in the early days of the internet and genealogy. There's a lot of challenges when we produce the content to make it searchable and findable. Some of the issues are related to the content itself. So one of the most important factors when you're looking for names is don't trust that the spelling is perfect. It can be off by a couple letters, it can be phonetically similar but not perfect. So that's a very important concept, is think about different variations of your name and the spellings. A practice I like to do is I collect a list of spelling variations that I've run into for the surnames that I'm working on.
That's a great idea.
So keep a little list, because they're sometimes hard to remember, and you'll start to recognize that, oh, this is the most common variant and others might be more rare.
Okay.
So think about the names. Another important thing is the length of the surname is important, because they have a limited space in the form to fill out, and if the enumerator has to write a very long name, this often causes the enumerator to take the first given name and turn it into just a single letter. And so in my case, my last name is Mansfield. It's 9 characters. The average length is 6.3.
6.3 characters is the average
length of a surname.
Okay,
in U.S.
and I didn't
federal
even
census.
think about that. So a longer surname, of course, the enumerator wouldn't have the opportunity, the space to fill out, like my maiden name is Stevenson.
Quite long.
And so, yeah, so frequently I would see like my father, my grandfather listed as George as G or GEO, and that was a space issue. I just never even put that together.
Right, and sometimes, like in my case, my grandfather was Matthew Lorenzo Mansfield, and so he is just ML.
Yeah.
2 initials for the given and middle name, and then the full name. So watch out for that.
That's
it happens
a really
lot.
Good point. So if you have a longer surname, really work with your given names and maybe just search the surname only in a particular area if you know where they live, and that might be your key to finding your person. That's a really good point.
Yeah, and another thing that will help here, because if the heads of household are abbreviated, search for someone else in the household.
Yeah, I've done that.
Search
That's
for a
great
child,
trick.
search for a spouse.
Yeah.
And then another excellent technique is most of the big websites like MyHeritage, Ancestry, Family Search, you can do an advanced search where you can put in multiple people. So here's the challenge. You have a common surname like Smith or Brown or all sorts of them, but if you know that you have a James, a Harry, an Elizabeth, and a William living together in a place, but they have this common surname, doing that combination can greatly disambiguate those very common surname situations.
That is such a great, thank you so much. Because a lot of people do have trouble. Now I will say, if you're not finding your family in a census, there is a chance that the enumerator missed a street. I've had that happen, where I actually went through the census and I saw all of the different people, I mapped them on a map, and the enumerator actually missed one side of a street, which happened to be the side I wanted. So that does happen. It's not very common, or sometimes your family member may have been in the process of traveling at the time of enumeration and moving. And so that may be another reason why you may not find your family in the census. So this isn't like surefire methods to solve all of your woes. but this can definitely help you when you're kind of hitting those walls, when you're really having a hard time finding them. I love that. You talked to me the other day a little bit too about the indexing process. Tell me a little bit more about that, would you?
Yeah, so indexing, these are massive collections, right? The US Federal Census today with 1950, I think, is over 700 million records.
Wow.
The number of keystrokes to create this is measured in the billions. And so, yeah, the man hours to create these materials are staggering. And it's an imperfect process. And different websites have indexed these censuses separately or sometimes together. Sometimes they're exchanging these materials, licensing them one to another. So you need to think about, maybe Family Search has an index, but Ancestry or MyHeritage, we might have a different version of the same index that was created completely independently.
So when they were indexing the record, and for those of you who aren't quite sure what that means, they're looking at the record and they're taking out the names and all of the pertinent information that then makes that record searchable. So you're saying that Ancestry may have indexed it and then you guys might have indexed it. So just by the fact that there's two separate indexes, I might find my family just through a general search on your site when I couldn't find it on Ancestry or vice versa?
Absolutely.
Well, that's something really important to keep in mind.
Yeah, and so I've actually had the chance to do some studies of an index from one company, trying to link it with the same index for another company, and the exact hit ratio between names was about 75%.
Seriously?
On just a name. So most records we have two names, a given name and a last name, so now you're down, if you multiply those probabilities, you're down about 50% perfect matching.
Well, that's really serious. And I don't think I do that enough. I mean, I kind of knew this a little bit, but I don't think I realized the extent to which you're talking about. And one of the other things that I've noticed, and maybe you can address this, is sometimes I may be on one of the other websites and I can't really read the image very well. The copy is kind of poor. And then I had this happen once on Ancestry. The copy of the census record, really, it just was very difficult to read. And then I pulled up the same census record on Family Search, and it was a better copy, and I could read that better. And I bet that happens with MyHeritage.
Yeah, so things like the US Census prior to 1940 were all on microfilm. And so there's also different versions of microfilm, different copies that were made. Yeah, so at Ancestry, I know in 1930 we had some film that had been very heavily scratched, particularly for some of my family. I couldn't read the names clearly because there were big scratches through those sections. But to your point, you could go to another site, find a better copy. I know that Ancestry, I think, fixed some of these bad microfilm problems on their copy as well. So exactly. And then different websites have different image enhancement tools.
Oh, that's a good point.
Maybe one site does a nice black and, invert video, white on black or black on white that can help you read it, or different abilities to change contrast that can also help.
Yeah, I have noticed that. On some sites I like the way that I can do that better than on other sites. So my advice to you, if you're trying to find a family in the census record, don't stick with wherever your home place is, whether it be Family Search, Ancestry, or MyHeritage. Be creative, go out there and take a look at some of these other sites to see whether or not it's something that they can answer for you. And I do have a lot of viewers that say, I can't afford to join all the sites. And I'd like to put a plug in here that I get that. It can be very expensive. But remember, Family Search is free, so you don't need to worry about that one. But I know MyHeritage and Ancestry and a lot of libraries offer a free library copy, so you can go to your local library and you can access their website for free if you're in a financial bind and you just can't afford to join one of them.
Exactly, and another good thing to think about, in addition to many public libraries, you'll find a library edition. MyHeritage is available for free at all of the LDS Family Search Centers.
Oh, great. Okay, so that's good to know.
If you want to look for that, you could go there and experience the site for free as well.
That's great. Do you have any other suggestions on census search techniques?
Yes, there's a litany of things that we should think about as good researchers. Let's first talk about ages and dates in census.
Okay.
So many of the census records that we're looking at, especially in the US, in federal census, there's an age often listed.
Yeah.
Only in 1940, I think we get an indication of who answered the form.
Right.
And so think about today, if an enumerator came to your house today and talked to your teenage son or daughter, would they get your age spot on or the age of your other household members? They could miss it. Or maybe it was a maid in a larger household that might be answering the questions on behalf of the householder. Some censuses, like in the United Kingdom, they purposely were asking people to round ages of minor children to the nearest 5.
Oh.
So you'll often see 10, 15, or 5. And then for other reasons, societal reasons, people might have been incentivized to cheat a little bit or to lie.
Oh, yeah.
So young children or minor children who were working in the United Kingdom before child labor laws were well established were paid primarily on their age. So if I have a couple of my children that are working at a farm nearby, I might inflate their age a little bit when I report them on the census, because that's how I've been portraying their age. So definitely think about ages as close. Hopefully they're accurate, but they're known to be problematic.
Well, and people didn't have birth certificates either, so a lot of times they honestly didn't
Yes,
remember.
Exactly. and that other factor, we don't know in most cases who was answering the questionnaire to the enumerator. So a lot of the census data we have at the header, we get the enumeration district, the state, the county. Those are generally quite reliable because they're broad and fairly standardized. But within the body of the census, we get information perhaps about where someone was born.
Oh, there's streets and
addresses. These
Okay.
places are especially problematic because they can be spelled and abbreviated in many different ways. They can be incomplete, they can be ambiguous. An example I like to think about is someone may say, "Where were you born?" and they wrote Paris. Okay, we could think, okay, is this Paris, France?
Or Paris, Texas.
Or Paris, Idaho?
Yeah.
Or there's probably a couple dozen other cities in the United States named Paris. Another good example is Moscow. I think there's a Moscow, Idaho again.
That's a good point.
And then when we get this data back from these keying operations, these places can be spelled. One of the censuses I was working on, it was the state of Tennessee. Tennessee was spelled, 300 different ways. And so all the companies do work to standardize and normalize these various spellings so we can give a better search experience. But very often it's impossible to do all of them. We'll get a list of unique places for even a Canadian census or US census that's hundreds of thousands of unique values. And so oftentimes we'll do what we call a partial normalization, where we're fixing the bulk of them, the ones that are most common, but then we have to leave the long tail kind of as they are, and it can be a little messy. So
That's good to know. You're a wealth of information about this stuff. I want to be your
been-
best friend. Can we talk on a regular basis?
Yeah, it's been over 23 years of working with census information like this and others. So.
Thank you so much. All right, so I love this, and I so appreciate you coming over here and telling me all about the census stuff. Some of you may not be really familiar with MyHeritage. Some of you may be big fans. You could add that in the comments. But tell me a little bit about MyHeritage, about the different things that you offer. You guys have some really cool stuff on your site, and some people may not know about it. So just a quick kind of overview of some of the great things you guys got going on at MyHeritage.
Sure, yeah. So at MyHeritage, you're going to find a very robust historical records collection. There is a lot of overlap between what we have in Family Search and Ancestry, but we all have pockets of unique collections. We're particularly strong in the Nordic countries, so Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland.
Okay.
Very excellent collections here in the United States as well. All of the censuses, US, Canada, United Kingdom, England, Wales, Scotland. We're doing some really cool projects right now in archives in Germany, particularly North Rhine-Westphalia as an example. We're indexing their civil registration records. So these are, right now we've done deaths, we're working on marriages, and births will be coming. So we're very active in working with these archives really around the world, as Australia, other places. Another important aspect of MyHeritage is we have a very different user community than what you're going to find in some of the companies that grew up here in North America. As a company that grew up in Israel, it started to attract a more European audience because we've been in many, many more languages than some of the companies that are based here.
Okay.
And so we have very strong communities across the Baltics, so Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, other European countries. We also recently purchased a very large site in France called Filet.
Yeah.
And much of the Filet content for France is now also on MyHeritage.
So if you're researching outside of the United States, you guys, because half of your records are outside of the US now, right? Is that about right, or is that number off?
I'd have to go look. I know what you and I talked about the other day was over half of our community, half of our about 100 million members most of these have submitted trees or DNA, over half of them do not live here in the US and Canada.
Okay.
In really leveraging this international community, you want to think about it's easier than trying, you can do it. Get your tree on MyHeritage so that we can do what we call a smart match, and that's a match between someone in my tree and a match in someone else's tree that look to be the same.
In France or wherever.
And through this way, I'm connecting with uncountable thousands of my 5th, 6th, 7th cousins who live in Norway and Denmark and Sweden. We know that trees aren't perfect and they're often fraught with errors, but they are a good place to get clues that can lead you down to correct research conclusions. So yeah, very, very helpful to look at what trees are there, and you'll find trees that are only on MyHeritage that are not on the sites here that we normally see from North America.
Well, I so appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
My
This
pleasure.
has been great. Now you can help find your family in the census. I really hope this video makes a huge difference in your world as you're looking for your family members. Thanks again.
Awesome.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Aimee.
Thanks.